Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, Energized by Celsius. It is a Wednesday edition of the show. Happy hump day to everybody out there. And while it's our third episode of the week, it is our second day live from the NFL Combine. And while yesterday we spoke to the Bucs brass, general manager Jason Licht and head coach Todd Bowles, today we talked to the prospects that could potentially be future Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Most notably today, we spoke to defensive linemen, inside linebackers, and edge rushers, which are all positions that the Bucs will be looking at in this year's NFL draft. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is my fellow colleague from PewterReport.com, Bailey Adams. Bailey, you are in your first NFL Combine in your illustrious journalism career. Give me your thoughts in your first time in Indy.
I'm enjoying it so far. I'm glad you mentioned that it was hump day and that it's Wednesday because I'm losing track of days.
Same.
Really am having a hard time with that, but everything's been great so far. I'm really enjoying the weather. Weather's been really nice out here. It was fun talking to Todd Bowles and Jason Licht yesterday. And I'd say almost even more fun talking to some of the prospects this morning.
Yeah, because the prospects are bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, They're obviously talking about their NFL career, their aspirations for, what they want to get into. They haven't seen the trials and tribulations such as, Devin White has been through a lot of crap. Antoine Winfield Jr. has been through a number of injuries. So, you're not ignorant to that stuff yet, at least at this point. So we spoke to a lot of prospects today. Like I said, the defensive line, inside linebackers, and edge rushers as well. You see Isaiah McGuire right there at Missouri. He was one of the guys. So the way it works for those watching at home right now that aren't as familiar with the Combine, while yesterday, as we spoke about, we talked to the coaches and the GMs, specifically for us with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Today and throughout the rest of the week, we'll be here until Saturday. You talk to different position groups. And for the Bucs in this year's draft, there's so many other positions that they need to fill overall. So each day, there's really something new. And the Bucs will be meeting with these players as well. I know we call it the underwear Olympics when it comes to the NFL Combine, but it is just as important with the formal interviews that really go on. So the Bucs had a couple of formal interviews at each position and some informal as well. We'll get into a couple of those. Derick from Auburn is one of the marquee guys, I would say, out of this group. That's why we put him on the cover of today's show. Also want to remind everybody that the Pewter Report podcast is energized by Celsius. We love all their flavors, but what we love more is when they come out with new flavors because it expands the palate even more. Check out the Fantasy Vibe and the Sparkling Lemon Lime. The Fantasy Vibe, it's like drinking a creamsicle. Bucs fans love creamsicle. The Lemon Lime, I've been a huge fan of. Once I got it last month at the Senior Bowl, I've been drinking it ever since on the way to Indy as well. It's your new favorite.
It is my new favorite. Yeah,
all right,
it's
awesome.
Peach vibe.
Cool, very cool. Essential vitamins, zero crash or jitters that you kind of get with other brands when you have a Celsius energy drink. If you want to find out where to get it, punch in your address in the store locator on the Celsius website and go to your local bodega to go get these new flavors. So once again, check out the Fantasy Vibe and the Sparkling Lemon Lime flavor at Celsius. #LiveFit, #Celsius Energy. So Todd Bowles and Jason Licht have a lot of decisions to make. Again, because free agency, Jamel Dean going to be back, is some of the veterans on the defensive line, will they be returning? And that's why they're at the Combine right now. So let's start. We can go a number of directions with this, Bailey, but do you want to read off some of the edge rushers that had formal interviews with the Buccaneers today or this week?
Yeah, so you can look at pewterreport.com. We have this ongoing combine interview tracker that will be updated by the day. And we started obviously today with, as Matt mentioned, the edge rushers, defensive linemen, inside linebackers. But yeah, going with the edge rushers first. They had formal interviews with Georgia's Nolan Smith, Kansas State's Felix Anudike Uzoma, Iowa State's outside linebacker Will McDonald, Auburn's Derick Hall, as you mentioned before, and Missouri's Isaiah McGuire, who you previously showed, and then Louisville outside linebacker Yaya Diaby, who when Scott Reynolds wrote on PewterReport.com, I believe it was last week, he wrote a Todd Bowles ideal Bucs draft where he drafted all Bucs defensive players because that's what Todd Bowles would like, right?
He would.
He's a defensive guy, and Yaya Diaby was a pick in that mock draft. So yeah, those are the formal interviews the Bucs had with edge rushers today. They had a ton of them. They meet with informally, where it's more the area scouts will meet with them, and it's kind of more of a getting to know you kind of thing, because I believe they're only allowed to conduct formal interviews with 45 players total. I think they're like 18-minute interviews that they can run with those with the Bucs brass, like the top guys, like the coordinators, Todd Bowles, Jason Light. But yeah, so that was 6 or 7 edge rushers they met with formally already.
Yeah, and let's start with Yaya Diaby. First of all, because his name is awesome. Who doesn't love saying Yaya? And he's going after a USF player, which obviously in this picture, so we know you would love that, yeah. Bailey. And like you talked about, Yaya was in Scott's quotations, Todd Bowles' dream draft. But we got familiar with Yaya because he was one of the guys that performed well at the Senior Bowl, I would say, in my opinion. And I think this is a good opportunity. Obviously, Louisville in a pretty solid division, but when you go up against like guys from the SEC and the Big Ten, and you still hold your own out there, I think that's really important. So I felt Yaya did a fairly solid job with them. And another guy that I think has really stood out is Derick Hall. I mean, the frame and physique on this guy is really something. I mean, look at the veins popping out of the biceps on him in this photo in particular. He really sets the tone out there because the size he plays bigger than he is. He's actually like an undersized player. And that's especially tough when you're an edge rusher and you're trying to get after the quarterback and you have these gargantuan offensive tackles kind of going after you. But what he lacks in the size, he obviously makes up with the strength that he has. I know Pro Football Focus in their draft analysis of him said that he's built like a Greek god. So I don't know if it gets any better praise than that. And
I don't think you can disagree. I mean, just look at this picture. I don't think you can disagree.
Yeah, and we'll have a video of Hall in a little bit talking about his meeting with the Bucs and how he feels about Todd Bowles. But another thing that he really brings to the table is the tenacity, the intensity. And I think that's really important when it comes to an edge rusher. For guys going after the quarterback, Bailey, in my opinion, you kind of have to have a screw loose a little bit. You almost have to – you obviously don't want to get penalized, but you got to exhaust all costs to get after the quarterback. And when you consistently are that Energizer bunny, that guy that's going to get after the quarterback, go, eventually you are going to wear down the will of the opponent trying to stop you. And I think that's where Derick Hall really shines through.
Yeah, I mean, you say he's an Energizer bunny. He might be energized by Celsius himself. We don't know that for a fact, but you might have. He's a guy who's really impressive and his physique, but also just his play style. And I think, you look at that picture you just had up. He had the C, the captain on his chest. Yeah. I think that's another important element. Of course, these, the general managers, the coaches are all talking to these guys, getting to know them, getting to know, their temperament, getting to know, what kind of drives them and what they are, what they would be like in a locker room, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I think Derick Hall is definitely someone to keep an eye on, someone I've been impressed with in the evaluation so far. And, it's really interesting to hear from him today, too.
We'll give a shout out to everybody watching the show right now. Shout out to Pewter People, as I like Rice Bish says. What up, Pewter People? Let's go. Mark Fisher, who always donates to pewterreport.com. By the way, if you donate to Pewter Report or you want to send us a super chat, We are the bouncers. You will get into the VIP. We will put your comment up right away. He says, forgive my ignorance. Why can't teams send, quote, top dogs or scouts at their home or school if they've declared for the draft for much longer than 18 minutes? Well, players don't usually declare for the draft until the season's done. So, I mean, scouts go to games, watch players, and you kind of on the assumption that they are going to. I mean, if it's a senior, you know they're coming out of the draft. You know, they don't have another option. But, you know, other guys can't, unless they hire an agent and everything, and NIL deals has changed everything. You can't just assume that they're going to declare for the draft. So that's why you can't have those meetings.
I mean, look at Florida State this year. Jared Verse, who I thought was going to be one of the top prospects in the draft, has decided to go back to school. I think probably part of that is NIL related. So, yeah, it's a changing landscape. But you know, you mentioned how they scouts go to games, and then later in the process, the team will have these players come to the Bucs facility for formal visits and that kind of stuff. So, you know, all that's part of the process. And yeah, I think it's weird to me. I was just going through this today and was like, why is it 18 minutes? Like, is it how do they set up
and who starts
minutes?
The clock? Like, is there an NFL official that comes in?
Right.
Maybe they got a referee. Maybe they got a ref, and he's like, all right, on my whistle, and they started from there. Yeah, that's interesting. The NFL has a lot of weird, quirky rules, and that's definitely one of it. Because I'm someone, you know, round it out, have a 0 or a 5, go in increments of that. Why 18?
I don't know.
I don't get that. Kenny Stats with the comment, I don't care how muscular a guy looks. He better be able to actually play. That's all I'm saying. That's definitely a fair state, you know.
Derick can play. That's the thing.
Well, yeah. And let's remember, as we lose connection for a second, let's remember, the Bucs love getting players from Auburn. You have Carlton Davis, you have Jamel Dean, or you had Jamel Dean. He might be leaving after this. And you have KJ Britt on the team. So the Bucs have a pipeline of a couple of schools. Auburn is definitely one of them. Washington has been there as of late. And obviously, he fits the mold there. We do have a $2 super chat from Bucs Basement. Thank you, Bucs Basement. Their super chat says, who's the likeliest to replace Lavonte David? We will be talking about the inside linebacker group in just a moment. We will finish up talking about the edge rushers because we want to also, while we talk about the prospects, we also want to get into the situation that Tampa Bay is in when it comes to outside linebackers. So two other guys I really wanted to mention real quick. Nolan Smith out of Georgia. He was the other star marquee player. So the complaint about Hall is that he doesn't have the size. Nolan Smith has the size. He's a much bigger guy. He was the most sought after guy at the press conference today. And the thing that he really brings is the quickness, is the speed. That's where the Bucs are really looking to get bigger and better at. Obviously, that's why they drafted Logan Hall last year. And the pass rushing moves, it's one when you have an arsenal of moves, but he's got the bend that comes with it too, the dip. You know, pad level is huge in this league. So Nolan Smith is a guy that should be on the Bucs radar. Will he be there at 19? You know, that's still up for debate.
Definitely a character too. I mean, you listen to him talking, and you'll have some videos come out. And you can probably find, you've probably already seen some videos, you know, circulating around Twitter and everything. And Nolan Smith certainly has a personality. You know, I didn't have, you know, a ton of production. I think that might be something that I don't know. Some teams might look at, some teams might not. So a lot of these days, it depends. It's differing philosophy where you look at a guy and you say, all right, well, how projectable is he? I don't really care what he did in college. Does he have the body? Does he have the mindset? Does he have the skill to turn that into something? And as I kick the desk here, and I think that's one thing that, you know, will remain to be seen is can that be something that he can take a step forward at the next level and, you know, put all that together and get that production that he didn't necessarily have in college at the college level.
The last edge rusher I want to talk about before we discuss the Bucs outside linebackers, and part of this is a shout out to Scott Reynolds, PewterReport.com, because he is a Kansas State Wildcat. But we watched the tape on this guy recently. Scott was showing us the tape as well, and Felix Anudike Uzama, the tape itself really was fantastic. The first thing for me is that he didn't just get to the quarterback, Bailey. he took the ball away.
Yeah.
I mean, how many forced fumbles did we see in his highlight video? And that was really something that the Bucs were missing last year. We talk about the splash plays. When an edge rusher gets to the quarterback, that ball should be coming out. Not every single time, obviously. We have to live in a little bit of reality.
Yeah.
But he had great hand placement, a fluid movement. I wouldn't say he was like the fastest guy, but he had a fluid movement to him and a big upper body that helped him just, steamroll some offensive lineman, whether he put one hand on him and they were already teetering over, or just using his skill set to get to the quarterback. He's a very exciting player.
Yeah, I think you can see the get off too.
Yes.
I think just off the ball, he has that burst, and really, really impressive player to watch. And I don't know, like you mentioned with the Bucs needed to get to the quarterback and knock that ball loose. We saw it in Shaq Barrett's. He led the league in sacks in 2019. He also led the league in forced fumbles. He had 6 forced fumbles that year. It was a huge part of the Bucs defense, and the Bucs need more takeaways. However they can get them, it doesn't matter if they're interceptions or forced fumbles or sack fumbles. The Bucs just need more turnovers going forward, and if they can find that in a guy like Enudike Uzoma, I think it would be something that everybody would enjoy. I think Scott would enjoy it maybe a little bit more, given that the Kansas State tie. But yeah, really an impressive player, and somebody that the Bucs met with formally. So keep him on your radar.
Scott would be absolutely giddy if they drafted this guy. Now, will he? I mean, even our guy Trevor Sikkema, we were having a conversation with him today about whether or not the Bucs are going to go with that route. And the reason why they might have to go with that route with their 19th overall pick is because there's a lot of questions for the Bucs when it comes to outside linebacker heading into the 2023 season. Shaq Barrett, as you see on the screen, is rehabbing. He's in the middle of rehabbing an Achilles injury. That's obviously really serious. I don't have very high expectations for Shaq Barrett. And then, of course, the other guy, maybe the most polarizing figure on the Bucs right now, defensively at least.
Devin White exists.
Devin White does exist. Yeah, you're right. Devin White is one. You know what? Todd Bowles said Antoine Winfield Jr. is top 3 best player on defense for the Bucs. I'm going to say Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, top 3 polarized.
There you go, yeah.
For the Bucs. And the story with JTS, 8 sacks in 2 seasons, 4 each season. He is Mr. Close, but no cigar.
I was going to say 8 sacks in 2 seasons. How many sacks did he just miss, you think? Probably, upwards of maybe 10 to 12, I think, that he's missed. Where, I mean, he's missing and he's making, and sometimes more than he's making. And he's a guy who really needs to take a step forward in year 3. I wrote about this on pewterreport.com. Went up this morning about how, the Bucs are hopeful that, adding George Edwards, the new outside linebackers coach, hoping that he can really, really, do some wonders and work some wonders with Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. And, man, when you had that Shaq Barrett, I don't know what it is in my mind, but when you had that picture of Shaq Barrett up there, it just feels like, and I know it happened like halfway through the season, but it just feels like we haven't seen Shaq Barrett play a long time. And it does. It worries me because I think it's almost in a situation these days where when a player tears his ACL, yeah, it's obviously a significant catastrophic injury, but you see a lot of comebacks these days from ACLs. You see that injury as one that guys are more, I don't want to say easily, because obviously the recovery and the rehab is just grueling, but you see those guys, you see stories of guys coming back from torn ACLs, maybe not, let's say more frequently, but you see a lot of that. And then the Achilles is something that kind of can linger. The Achilles injury is a tough one to get over, especially when you're 30 years old, as Shaq will be. And I know Todd Bowles said, yeah, Tom Brady played until he was 45. That doesn't. Tom
he's
Brady's
the exception to the rule.
Exception. I don't think we can start looking at everybody in the Bucs roster and saying, well, he could play until he's 45, because that's just, especially with different positions, that's not going to be the case. But yeah, it's interesting to see what the Bucs will do with their pass rush, because they need it to be much, much better. And I wouldn't say it was like the reason why the Bucs went 8-9 last year. I mean, obviously, a lot of that blame lies with the offense, but the Bucs defense's inconsistency, and I think their lapses probably came a lot of times as a result of failing to get the quarterback.
And I think what is most concerning, as you said, Bailey, that Shaq, it felt like he wasn't there much that season or last season. But that's because the production that he was bringing really wasn't that spectacular at the time. I hate to kick a man while he's down. I'm not kicking Shaq Barrett by any means. But Shaq only had, 2 or 3 sacks in that going into that Thursday night game.
Yeah.
And he was playing really well in that game specifically before he got injured, which sucked. But it wasn't like Shaq was playing like the Pro Bowl player that he's been since going to Tampa Bay. So the thing that's most scary, on top of an uncertainty with Shaq Barrett, an uncertainty with Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, but the Bucs don't have any other options.
Yeah.
You know, Anthony Nelson was better than Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. Let's just call a spade a spade. Anthony Nelson, who was going into free agency, played better when Shaq got hurt, when it was up to him and JTS. The victor went to Anthony Nelson. And Carl Nassib, again, is a free agent. He's a team guy, was formerly a team captain. I like the motor that Carl Nassib brings, but it's no guarantee that he's going to be back. So that's the scariest thing for me is, and you talk about the offensive side of the ball where when they're going to cut Donovan Smith, they have to figure out what they're going to do at offensive tackle and might pigeonhole the Bucs. They're kind of getting pigeonholed with outside linebacker because Shaq's going to be gone for a while. And if JTS doesn't live up to the hype, well, the Bucs are kind of back to square one.
Yeah, and one other guy I want to mention is Cam Gill, because I think they were kind of counting on Cam Gill to be a really important rotational guy this past year, and obviously he suffered that. It was a foot injury, right, in training camp, and he missed the whole year. So, I hope to see him back just for Cam's sake, but also for the Bucs' sake. Hope to see him kind of bounce back and turn into the player the Bucs need him to be. But again, that's another question. It's like he missed all of this past season, and he's never been the guy who is he's never been the most productive player. It's somebody that they're counting on to take that next step. And will that injury set him back? Will he be able to come back and have that type of impact they need from him? I don't know. It's another question.
It's another question. One question that I always have is, who am I going to pick when I am playing with Underdog Fantasy? And football season might be done, but that's all right. They have so many other sports that you can get involved with, whether it's the UFC. Huge fight this weekend. John Bones Jones makes his return. He's fighting on Saturday night. That's a great card. I'm very excited for that one. You also have the NBA. You also have the NHL. Baseball's in spring training right now. They're coming back at the end of this month because we are in the month of March. Man, that's crazy. Our birthdays are coming up. And you have golf as well. And if you're a fan of Netflix, there's the series Full Swing. A lot of people have been getting into that, so it's great to bet on the PGA as well. Underdog Fantasy is the best place to get involved with professional sports, and that's with their rivals and their pick'ems games. Usually I say pick'ems first, rivals, but you know what? New city, new ad read. So the pick'em and rivals are so much fun. You just have to pick at least two players in their prop bets, whether it's most points, will they get a birdie on this hole, whatever it is. And the pick'em, you're usually rooting for your players. The rivals, you might be picking against a team that you hate, whether it's maybe the Lightning are playing the Panthers and you want the Panthers to do poorly, or who are the Rays rivals? I guess the Marlins.
Yankees.
Oh, Yankees. Yeah. What am I saying?
Everyone hates the Yankees.
Pick against the Yankees. I'm all with that. So go to Underdog Fantasy, use the promo code Pewter, and double your first deposit. Do the Magic have a rival?
The Heat, I would say.
Yeah. All right. Well, people do like Miami Heat.
Yeah.
All right. We'll just stick with dissing the Florida Panthers. So
sure.
Double your first deposit up to $100 using the promo code Pewter over at Underdog Fantasy. Check it out today. All right. The next position that we spoke to was side linebacker. And what I should have prefaced is that edge rusher was the most sought after, at least by the Bucs, when it came to formal interviews. There were not as many formal interviews when it came to inside linebacker, but that's okay. We'll spend a little more time on Devin White. I was about to say Devontae White. Devin White and Lavonte. But I guess that would, if you mix their names together, that's what it would be. But I know Drew Sanders was one of the guys that had a formal interview. Bailey, if you just want to tell us the other formal interview and maybe a couple of the guys that had an informal interview.
Yeah, so it was Drew from Arkansas was one formal. The other formal was Indiana inside linebacker Cam Jones. They actually had quite a bit of the informals with some of these guys. Sebastian Dennis from Pitt. He met with them both at the Senior Bowl and the Combine. Isaiah Moore from North Carolina State. TCU's D. Winters, who I know had a pretty good Senior Bowl week himself. I talked to Florida inside linebacker Ventrell Miller today, and he said he's spoken with the Bucs a couple of times, both informal, and then a couple other guys, DJ Johnson, Dr. Hayward, and Owen Papo. So I mean, there's a lot of guys they've talked to, but only those two formals where I think they're probably with those informals doing their due diligence. But they'll know by I don't know what it'll be, a couple weeks probably, whether or not Lavonte David is back. And if Lavonte David comes back, you have Lavonte David, you have Devin White as your starters, and that inside linebacker need becomes more of, all right, who are we going to find later in the later rounds for depth, and maybe a potential guy to develop to step in next to Devin White whenever Lavonte David does hang him up or go elsewhere, whatever ends up happening. So it'll be interesting to see. I think they're probably doing their due diligence there, but in talking to Todd Bowles and Jason Light yesterday, it sounded like they want to get something done with Lavonte David. Obviously, the money's going to have to be right. They're $56 million over the cap as it is right now, so they'll have to get under the cap. They'll have to be able to see if they can figure out, the right pay for Lavonte David.
The price is right and the deal is real, as Bruce Arians once said. I don't know if Todd Bowles really has a saying. He has one saying, but we're not going to give that away. Just real quick, when it comes to Drew Sanders, PFF has him. They have a section that says shades of, or like who he's similar to, and their shades of is Troy Anderson. And Troy Anderson was a guy that I really liked coming out of school last year. He was just a tackling machine. But the pros of him, of Drew Sanders, rushes the passer like an edge defender, helps that he played that position in Alabama, gassed up in the open field, works to the sideline with ease, long and lean, ideal body type for an off-ball linebacker in today's NFL. Some of his cons, still figuring out the breaking down in space as a tackler thing, logged 22 missed tackles in 2022. His eyes are in the backfield in coverage and won't find receivers coming into the zone. Doesn't have the pop when taking on guards you'd expect from a former edge. More of a block avoider. Kind of sounds like Devin White a little bit. And yeah, I did speak to Drew Sanders a little bit. His demeanor was quite interesting because I felt he was taking it seriously. I don't think that he was, poo-pooing the questions and the atmosphere. But he was very cool, calm, and collected. And I think a lot of times with football players, especially defensive players, we look for the guy that's like in your face, tenacity we talked about earlier. We want a guy that's just kind of going to be all up in your grill. And that wasn't really Drew Sanders at all. That doesn't mean that he doesn't care or anything like that. I mean, we've seen on the flip side, I was talking to Scott about this, Tristan Wirfs is the definition of Mr. Nice Guy, and he's the best right tackle in the NFL, or arguably. So it was just interesting seeing him so chill up there compared to some of the other defensive linemen. But as we mentioned, Todd Bowles talking about Devin White, Jason Light talking about Lavonte David. We do have a brief clip of them talking about the respective linebackers, and we'll dive further into the two top guys for the Bucs after this video.
That he's one of the iconic players of Tampa Bay and will always be a Buccaneer. And, I'm still not out of the realm of possibility that he'd be playing for us next year. So it takes two to agree to it. So we'll see how that unfolds. But he's an awesome player. We don't want to talk about any offers or any conversations that we've had so far, but would love to see Lavonte continue to play.
Devin takes a lot of heat for some of the things everybody charges him missed tackle, but he makes tackles that I haven't seen linebackers make in 30 years. He can make plays for us. He's still one of our best two players on defense. I have a lot of faith in him. His growth mentally, understanding the system, it's not an easy system, has been outstanding. I think the world of the guy. I think he's a heck of a ball player. I think this will probably be one of his better seasons.
You can hear from Todd Bowles talking about Devin White. We've talked about that. It's a blind spot for Todd is Devin White, but they have a true like great relationship between the two of them. To go as far to say that Devin has made tackles that he hasn't seen in 30 years, I don't know. That's a bit of a stretch. And for Jason Light, the way the question was phrased because it very much sounded like Jason was talking in like past tense, like he was a great Buccaneer. We were there. He wasn't meaning like, oh, it's off the table for Lavonte David. It's just the way the question was phrased, and it may look that type of way. But let's start with Lavonte. I don't exactly know what the market is for Lavonte David, especially now that Bobby Wagner is available as well. Lavonte is aging. He's still good.
Yeah.
He's still solid and consistent, but he's not the all-pro level Lavonte David. I truly think, I want to get your thoughts. The Bucs are going to give him an offer. It's not going to be exactly what Lavonte wants. It'll be less than what Lavonte was getting next year, but I think the understanding is, Lavonte, we love you. This is all we can afford right now. If you want to take it, we'd love to have you back. But if you want to shop around a little bit and then return, we can address that too.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday, you, Scott, and I. We were mentioning how, there are a lot of younger inside linebackers who are going to be hitting the market this offseason. And so you kind of wonder what the market is like for him. And you do think maybe they give him an offer. It's, I don't know, maybe wherever they can realistically afford him.
Yeah.
And see, all right, hey, if you get a deal somewhere else, that's up to you to decide whether that deal somewhere else is worth, leaving this team that, Lavonte said that he would like to be back, like to retire a Buccaneer, but obviously he's mentioned how it's a business and the money has to be right and all that. But, if he goes somewhere else and they give him a significantly bigger deal, you'd imagine he's going to take it. But if it's kind of a marginal difference, I know it's funny to say marginal when we're talking about millions of dollars here. When it's a marginal difference to an NFL player and to what he's already made, you kind of wonder what will come into him making that decision. What will go into the decision? Will it be, all right, well, the Bucs probably aren't going to be a Super Bowl contender right now. I can go somewhere else to maybe play for the playoffs, play for the Super Bowl. That could be a possibility. Maybe it's, just let me just get as much money as I can while I'm an NFL player. Or maybe it's, hey, I could take a little bit less money, not deal with the state income taxes in Florida, which is probably a benefit to the Bucs.
Jordan Boyer really wants
yeah. And, maybe he thinks, that just means that much to him, where he wants to be a guy who sticks with the team for his entire career. He's referenced before Rondé Barber and Derick Brooks, and how rare that is, especially these days, and what it would mean to him for that to happen. So, obviously the money has to be right, and it's hard to kind of even gauge where the money will be right now, because they have so much work to do to get cap compliant, and so you don't even know how much they can afford to give him with that initial offer. But it'll be definitely interesting to see and kind of monitor over the next couple of weeks.
Exactly. That's the cog in the whole machine. I really like what you brought up earlier about bringing in someone to essentially groom them to be the next starter. Because let's face it, if Lavonte isn't back, and sure, there's other linebackers out there in free agency, but the depth at linebacker right now is really, really bad. And I'm not trying to diss, KJ Britt and JJ Russell, but they're fine special teams players. If the Bucs want to keep them on the 53-man roster, I'm all for it, because they help out in special teams. Like, you can't trust them to be a starting inside linebacker for a Todd Bowles-led defense. We actually have a lot of difference of opinion. We'll talk about Devin in just a moment, because Al says, I like Devin. I don't get the hate. Only thing is, when 2023 is over, how can we afford it? That's the other side of this whole equation, is that they're already in a tough financial spot. Next year, they have to decide whether they still want Devin White as their inside linebacker. But if you lose Lavonte this year and you lose Devin White this year or next year, you are essentially forced to pick an inside linebacker early, either in this year's draft or next year's draft. And is Devin worth the money? I don't know.
Depends on who you ask.
It really depends on who you ask. Al, also talking about Lavonte, said 10, maybe 9 if Bobby is still on the market. And then Charlie, with a much different of opinion about Devin White, said, dude gets straight embarrassed against the Ravens on national television and then goes out and makes terrible comments after the game.
Yeah, that was a bad one.
Yeah, Charlie goes on to say, I don't understand anything Todd Bowles is seeing with Devin. We got 4 years of mostly subpar play. for a 5th overall pick. I don't agree with subpar play for his tenure with the Bucs.
Yeah.
I mean, like his rookie year, he's learning the game. I think it was quite promising. The year they won the Super Bowl, he was a very exciting player, did pretty well. I would just say
down the stretch in that year and in the playoffs.
Yeah, remember, he had an interception in the Super Bowl that, the game was pretty much done by then.
The Saints game too, he had that big pick.
Yeah, and it at least secured that the Chiefs didn't score a touchdown. And you could say that for the rest of history, that the Bucs defense did not allow a touchdown to the Kansas City Chiefs offense. And also, for those that do Super Bowl boxes myself, I won so much money because no one scored. I won for the 3rd quarter, and no one scored in the 4th quarter.
Wow.
So thank you to Devin White for that. But yeah, what's your thought about the Devin White situation?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I very, very much just kind of ride the fence on it. It's tough to do. It's tough to do that. I'll do it though, because you see in some cases what Todd Bowles sees with Devin White, and in other cases you're like, what is this dude talking about? Like Devin White is just, you see him, he can't get off a block, and he makes these he overruns plays, he makes these mistakes that you just can't make, and that Ravens game is a prime example, and that was a really, really bad showing for Devin White. And then I don't think there's been times where I don't think Devin's helped himself, whether it's been in the media, on Twitter, whatever he said, there's been some times where he hasn't helped himself, but you see the star potential there, you see that playmaking ability, and I think down the stretch in 2022, this past season, you saw a little bit more of a reined-in Devin White. You saw he didn't make as many mistakes. He wasn't, having the troubles that he was having earlier in the season, but at the same time, you kind of lost that playmaking ability. You weren't seeing him with the sacks as much. You weren't seeing him force fumbles or, getting any turnovers. So it's one of those things where you have to determine what is the trade-off. Can you live with some of those mistakes if you're going to get, these splash plays, or, are you going to say, all right, just because the way the Bucs linebackers are set up right now, like Lavonte David hasn't been that same playmaker that he was earlier in his career, but Devin White was making the plays a couple of years ago. But then if you have two guys that are just steady linebackers, that could be good, but there's a very defined ceiling there. I think it is, if you're not having a playmaking linebacker. But again, it depends on how safe you want to be and how much you can live with those issues sometimes, because they are tough to watch when they happen.
Football fan says, yes, need to think about Devin. He's just so inconsistent. And, that's one of the sentiments about the Lavonte Devin combo. I mean, there was a time where a lot of people said that they were the best linebacker duo in the NFL. And then it kind of became, man, Lavonte David is really covering up for a lot of the mistakes that Devin White is making. So it's a big year for Devin, for him to be on his own. If the Bucs are going to be in a post Lavonte David world, the magnifying glass is going to be way on top.
There's a good point too of someone made up there, on the side of, if you have to think about paying Devin White, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
And I think that the comment says, do we pay Wirfs? Don't even have to think about it. Even Winfield, pay him. Devin, you do have to think about it. I think that's actually a good point. I think Tristan Wirfs is obviously a slam dunk. He's the top priority in terms of getting a new contract done, for the future. Winfield's another guy they want to have to keep around. But you kind of mentioned, you think about the situation they're in where, if they do lose Lavonte David, or even if they don't lose Lavonte David this offseason, but if it's, he's 33 years old now, he just had a birthday a couple weeks ago. I guess it might have been a month ago now. I forget, we're in March.
It's
a weird thing. But, he doesn't have that long left in the NFL, especially at a high level. So you kind of wonder, even if he signs a new deal a couple years down the road, you're probably going to have to replace him. And if you're thinking we're moving on from Devin White, you're going to have to replace him. So you probably are going to find yourself in that situation, regardless of whether or not they bring back Lavonte David this offseason. So that's kind of a tough place to be in for the Bucs.
A solid comment from Only Bucs fan there. Good one. I like Rice. Bish also said, Devin is hyper athletic and charismatic. I think Todd really does like him, but he's blinded by the awe of such an athletic linebacker. If White can rein it in, he could be the top linebacker in the league. I was just thinking, Todd being in awe of Devin. Todd's a big music guy, so maybe he likes Get Live Stables.
He might like that song. Yeah, what a song.
Yeah, great song. We're going to talk about the defensive tackles in just a moment. But first, let's hear a message from our friends at Age Rejuvenation.
As we age, our hormones decrease, both for men and women.
I was tired all the time, had no sex drive.
I was groggy.
I felt like I was 80 years old because everything hurt.
I came to Age Rejuvenation because I was tired all the time.
Bioidentical hormones has really made such an impact in people's lives.
I actually enjoy shopping now.
Got all my energy back.
Mind is sharp.
I feel like I'm 18 again.
It was perfect for me.
Get with Age Rejuvenation. Do it now. Don't wait.
Call Age Rejuvenation today.
Have better sex using agerejuvenation.com. That is former Buccaneer John Gilmore, who's part of the Pewter Tailgate show this season.
I miss John.
You miss John?
Now that we're in the offseason and I don't get to see John at the tailgate shows anymore. Miss John.
He seems like a good dude. I've never met him because obviously I did the Pewter Game Day show live from my home studio. But yeah, seems like an awesome guy. Clearly in great shape, you can tell by that photo. And he talks a ton about how much it's helped him. Scott Reynolds of PewterReport.com has talked a lot about how it's energized him a lot more. I know we typically think of Celsius with that, but it's given Scott a lot of energy as well. He feels younger too. They have testosterone therapy, peptide therapy, and stem cell therapy. So go to agerejuvenation.com and see how it can help you today. Bailey, there was one linebacker that was a snub from the Combine this year. We saw him at the Senior Bowl, but he's not at the Combine, but he could be a potential late-round replacement for Lavonte David.
Yeah, Jackson State's Aubrey Miller. You know, you guys, if you were, watching the podcast back when we were in Mobile, doing the road games there in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, we talked a lot about Miller that week. He had a fantastic week. Kind of surprising, I think, not to see him, get the Combine invite because of just, everything he did, not only at the Senior Bowl, but just, at Jackson State. And really, really fun player to watch, really intriguing player. And I think we've had him in a couple of mock drafts, and we've written about him a couple of times as somebody who could be a day 3 pick that maybe doesn't start, in 2023, but is somebody that you eventually, build up, develop, groom to be a starting caliber player. Someone with a lot of upside, it looks like.
He was super exciting to watch. And he kind of looked like Devin White because he was wearing number 45 and he had a lot of confidence and swagger. But you talk about turning the ball over, which the Bucs need a lot of that going into the season. He was forcing fumbles left and right. I mean, he was great on the blitz. He was demolishing some of the running backs. I know he forced a fumble on Georgia running back Kenny McIntosh, which I kind of felt bad because he had got injured the day before. Yeah. He had those leg cramps. He comes back and wham, he hits him and forces a fumble.
Welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back. He sent another running back, got the whirling dervish kind of going. So he was making plays. I think a lot of people were really surprised that he did not get the invite to the NFL Combine. But you know what? Now he'll have a bigger chip on his shoulder, and hopefully that'll help him if he goes to Tampa Bay this year. Let's get into the defensive linemen. Again, not too many formal interviews, but formal and informal interviews. Bailey, hit us with it.
So the formal interview was South Carolina's Zach Pickens, who's somebody I watched, on the way to Mobile when we were having that long car ride. I watched a little bit of Zach Pickens and came away impressed with him. And I think he had a pretty solid showing in Mobile. But that was it. That was the only formal interview they had. They had a informal with Northwestern's, I'm going to butcher this, Adetomiwa Adebayor?
Close enough. We kept calling him Double A from Northwestern. He,
again,
was at the Senior Bowl and was great at the Senior Bowl. Really, the only issue with him is that he's 6'2", and he ain't getting any taller. He's already pretty wide, so how much wider can he really get?
Yeah.
But it was really fun to watch at the Senior Bowl, so interesting to see where he will go. A couple of the other guys, Clemson defensive lineman KJ Henry and Alabama defensive lineman DJ Dale. We'll talk about them in just a moment. You also had Texas D lineman Keandre Coburn and West Virginia's Dante Stills. Now, KJ Henry and DJ Dale actually spoke a little bit more about the Bucs specifically. So because Henry played at Clemson, he's actually familiar with Bucs safety Nolan Turner. For those who might be, what? Who? Nolan Turner? He signed as an undrafted free agent out of Clemson and almost made the Bucs roster at training camp. He did not, but went to the practice squad and then eventually got onto the main roster after injuries and things of that nature. And then for DJ Dale, he had an interview with the Bucs, an informal one, but he talked a lot about his meeting where they watched tape together, and they asked him if he was watching the Bucs specifically. He said that he liked some of the Bucs defensive linemen. He said that he watched tape of Vita Vea even all the way back when Vita Vea was playing at Washington. So a little bit of a Bucs connection there. A couple other guys spoke about the Bucs, Derick Hall and Leota. What's his first name? It's like Iku Leota. Had some cool things to say about the Bucs, whether it was meeting the Bucs or using Tampa Bay in Madden. So we're just going to play a little compilation of these prospects at linebacker, edge rusher, and D-line, talking about your Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the discussions that they've had.
I met with him last night, actually, and, had the opportunity to sit down, talk with him, get up on the board, talk some defense, watch some film from Auburn and really process, show my IQ and the things that I really love, doing with this game of football.
Right. And what was your impression of Todd Bowles?
I loved him. He wasn't the guy that really, said much at the time. He sat back and, I think we held that position. You really need the opportunity to really sit back and just watch our guys approach, how they really do a lot of different things. So it was amazing.
Nolan Turner is like the Hunter Renfrow of defense. He looks like he shouldn't be that fast, that athletic, and that good at football, but he is. I promise you he is. A great person, good friend of mine, definitely helped me with my career and the leadership that he had being an older brother. I think he's just a gem that the Bucs have, and I think he'll be playing for football for a very long time.
Just watching its defense and playing with their defense on Madden as well. So it's just like you get a feel. They're a 3-4 defense. They run a 4-2-5 at times. So I played a lot of different schemes, and that's what's helped me become the player that I am today as well.
So. Another great organization. I watch a lot of the guys. I'm a fan of a lot of the defensive linemen there. But yeah, some good conversation.
Vita Vea has become one of the best nose tackles and linemen in the league. Logan Hall, they just drafted last year, so a lot of talent there.
Yeah, they asked me about some guys who I like to watch. He's definitely a guy that I say every single time. I watched him since he was at Washington. So yeah, he's a good dude.
On top of
Yeah, so it was really interesting to hear from some of those guys, especially with the Bucs connection there. You'd ask them a little bit about some of the current Bucs players and guys they've played with or guys they've watched. KJ Henry was an interesting one. Kind of was listening to him talk. Really, really bright guy. Really interesting to hear from. There's a distinction to make here. He's a defensive lineman. He's listed as a defensive lineman, but he's more of an edge guy. He's got the body of an edge guy, and he is an edge rusher. But we've lumped him in here listed as defensive lineman, but. Yeah, it's always fun to kind of hear. I think we did a little bit in Mobile and now here in Indy, where you kind of hear from some of these guys and their impressions of different teams. I think you hear some of the questions from people covering other teams and kind of get an insight and a look into how these guys view the NFL, how they watch the NFL game, and some of them just maybe casually, some of them really watching guys like trying to get better, watching these guys on tape. And maybe playing Madden with them. So it's always fun to kind of get that insight.
Yeah, it's crazy like how much people have learned about Madden, like different defenses and blitzes and schemes like that. And
I've never been very intricate of a Madden player. I've been like that one. And
I'm always like, screw it, just blitz them.
As I've gotten, a little bit more football over the years, I'd be like, all right, I'll kind of
offensively, I'll try to set stuff up legitimately. Really, defense, I'm kind of like, all right, just like you get a turnover, or just get me the ball back.
Exactly.
How do I get after the quarterback? But yeah, it is fascinating to see. Some people don't watch the NFL at all. Like I remember Trevor Lawrence saying, like, yeah, growing up, he was a big fan of Tennessee, which makes it odd he didn't go to Tennessee and he went to Clemson, but he didn't really watch football. A lot of other guys watch like players from their alma mater that are now in the NFL, and like DJ Dale, even though he went to Alabama, he was watching Vita Vea, which brings us to the situation that the Bucs have at defensive line. And you got Vita Vea, one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league. You have Logan Hall going into his second year. a little bit more to be desired when it comes to Logan Hall and Bailey. That's it.
About it.
And Will Golston is a longtime veteran, still got some gas left in the tank, but he is heading into free agency. I feel like Will, it's either going to be back with the Bucs or he's going to retire, or, he's from Michigan, so I wouldn't rule out him like going to the Lions, especially because they're like kind of on the up and up.
Yeah.
But Nacho, again, energy guy.
Nacho feels like he'll be back. I don't know why.
I would say, I have a better feeling about Nacho returning than I do Will Golston. Who am I missing? Pat O'Connor, obviously, signed a one-year deal last year, so he's free agent. Akeem Hicks is the big one. I don't feel like Akeem Hicks will be back. He got injured for a little bit. Helpful in the run, but he had one sack. He had one sack, and it came in the last week of the regular season. Good veteran presence. I just feel like the Bucs would rather go in a different direction.
Yeah, I would be pretty shocked if he's back. And I was finding myself thinking about this, earlier today, with Golston and with Nacho. I feel like Nacho's always been a reserve kind of guy, and I think he would be back in that role if he were to return to Tampa. I almost feel with Golston, like if he's back, that might kind of be his kind of thing too, where like he's not a starting defensive lineman for the Bucs anymore. I don't know. Maybe they do think he can bounce back from this past year because it wasn't the greatest year for Will.
Yeah.
But maybe they think, all right, we'll see. Have some young guys to bring in, but we'll see what Will can do. Still at this age. Or maybe they say, hey, Will's a valuable presence in the locker room. He can still get the job done as a rotational guy. Let's bring him back, on the cheap. So I don't think he's going to cost a ton. So just definitely a weird spot to be in because they need to get younger up front.
They do.
But they don't have any, and I think they have so many other needs that they can't just, stockpile through the draft. They can't be like, let's just draft 4 defensive linemen because it's just not a reality for them.
Well, Jason Light said if I had it my way, I'd draft 5 pass rushers and we'd have 15 picks. I agree. So Will was better in 2021 than he was in 2022. What does that mean for 2023? What I will argue is he was better towards the end of last season, which I think helped Kate. We'll see. Again, the Bucs, obviously a smaller contract, but the Bucs don't really have too much room for really any of that. And you heard Jason say, we need speed and we need to get younger. And, defensive line, that's why Logan Hall is there because he brings the speed. Will doesn't necessarily do that. Neither does Nacho. So the Bucs have a lot of tough decisions to make. An easy decision to make, though, is picking Celsius as your energy drink. You heard us talk about the new flavors earlier, but don't forget about the vibes. The vibes are always high on this show, and we're talking about the Arctic vibe, one of my favorite flavors, the peach vibe, and tropical vibes. You also got a lot of other great flavors from the sparkling kiwi guava to the classic orange, the sparkling watermelon, strawberry acai. What else is there? Strawberry lemonade as well, the Fuji apple pear, and the peach mango. A ton of awesome different flavors. If you want to get them in bulk, I'd recommend getting the variety pack because variety is the spice of life. As much as you love your bodega, get them sent to your house every week, month, quarterly, whenever it is. Again, just make sure you're drinking Celsius Energy Drinks, the official sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast. That's about going to do it for us on today's show. But please, if you're a fan of pewterreport.com, please like and subscribe to our social media at Pewter Report on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Pewter Report TV. We have the podcast on here 4 times a week. We have various clips from, press conferences, clips from the podcast that are a little more specific. We have stuff up from the Combine this week. Todd Bowles talking about Antoine Winfield Jr., where he's going to play at safety next season. The discussion about Kyle Trask. We're going to have a little more content coming up today and tomorrow and the rest of the week. So please, just do us a favor. Hit that thumbs up. Hit that like button. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And, don't you worry. We're done with today's show. But we have another one coming up tomorrow at 4 p.m. Tomorrow at the Combine. The cornerbacks are speaking, and boy, do we know the Bucs need some corners, potentially, depending on what happens in free agency. But that'll do it for us on today's show. For Bailey Adams, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching. We will see you tomorrow for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Peace out.
Out.